Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel Risk Modeling Hub. So, if you are preparing for credit risk interview or you are already working in credit analytics and want to deepen your expertise, then this video is absolutely for you. You can also check out my channel. I have prepared content on different topics of scorecard and their expected interview questions. Also, you can watch IFRS 9 Masterclass if you are a beginner. More such content will be coming soon. So don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more updates on credit risk. So here's the thing. Credit scorecards might seem like just numbers and formulas, but they literally control who gets credit and who doesn't. Banks make billions of dollars in decisions based on these models. Get the scorecard wrong and you are looking at massive losses, regulatory penalties and even losses of banking licenses. So today we are covering critical interview questions on application scorecard, scaling and cutoff selection. The exact topics that senior professionals are asked in interviews at tier 1 financial institutions like JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Deutsche Bank and other major lenders. And by the end of this video, you will not only understand how to build and deploy the scorecards, but you will understand why each decision matters and what interviewers are really looking for when they ask such questions. So stick around. This could be the difference between getting that job and hearing that we'll keep your resume on the file. So let's get started. So let's start with our first question, and I want you to understand something important before we even get to the answer. Imagine you are sitting across from a director of credit risk. They ask you, why do we even need scorecard scaling? And why can't we use just the raw probabilities from our statistical model? So, this question is testing three critical things. Like, do you understand that scorecard development isn't just about building an accurate statistical model? It's about operationalizing that model for real business decisions. Also, do you grasp that non technical stakeholders like your CEO, your lending managers, your customers need to understand the credit decisions? And raw probabilities don't cut it. Also, can you connect the dots between the statistics and business? Because that's what separates the junior analyst from the strategic contributors. Most candidates fail this question because they jump straight into math without explaining the why. Interviewers hate that and they want someone who thinks like a business strategist and not just a data scientist. So, alright, here's the question. Explain the concept of scorecard scaling and why is it necessary in credit risk modeling. So here's the deal. Scorecard scaling converts raw model outputs into simple, easy to use point system that everyone can understand and act upon. Think about it this way. Your logistic regression model gives out a probability between 0 and 1. Let's say an applicant has a 0.15 of PD. Great for statisticians, right? But what does that mean to your branch manager who needs to make a lending decision in next 5 minutes? That 0.15 doesn't mean to him nothing. Now imagine instead of this, you tell him that this customer scores 640 on our credit scorecard and suddenly they get it. They know what that means and they know whether to approve or decline that customer. So here's why scaling is absolutely critical. First, it makes consistency across the organization. If your branch in New York and your branch is in California and both are using the same scorecard, a score of 650 means the same thing everywhere. Same risk level, same credit worthiness, and that's huge for regulatory compliance. Also, the risk-based pricing. Once you have scores in a standardized range, let's say 300 to 850, like FICO scores, you can segment your customers into risk tiers. Customer scoring 750 to 850, let's say, might get 5% of interest rate. And customer scoring, say, 650 to 700 are getting 8%. Customer scoring below 600 are set up on 12% or are declined. So scaling makes this automatic and defensible. This also gets us the explainability for customers as well. Explainability. So when someone is denied the credit, you need to explain why in a way they understand. So your score is too low is much clearer than your log odds ratio is negative, right? They won't be able to understand this log odds concept, but scoring concept is explained and understood by everybody. Most important from the regulatory compliance as well. Banking regulators increasingly they demand that models be explainable. Scorecards are explainable, but raw model probabilities they are not so much. So here's the thing. Scaling isn't necessary. It isn't arbitrary too. It's designed and mathematically so that the score maintains a direct relationship with log odds. So we conclude that scaling isn't necessary. It's utmost important thing because it ensures accuracy which is preserved at all the way through the end user. So, when an interviewer asks this question, they are really asking, do you understand that credit modeling is about solving a business problem, right? And it's not just about maximizing the AUC. So, all right, that brings us to our next question, where we dive deeper into how actually do you scale a scorecard. So, let's talk about the PDO method. This question separates the people who have actually built the scorecards from the people who have just read about them in the textbook. So here the interviewer is really testing if you can articulate the exact mathematical framework that 90% of the banks use for scorecard scaling. And more importantly, can you explain it clearly enough that someone who's never seen a scorecard before would understand? And if you fumble upon this one, the interviewer knows that you haven't built scorecard in production and that's it. But here's the cool part, that this framework is elegant. Once you understand it, it makes all the sense and you will impress any interviewer. So the question comes that describe the points, odds and PDO, points to double the odds. This comes in the scaling method. So the PDO method, it is the industry method, and let me break it down step by step. PDO stands for point to double the odds. We all know that. But here's the core concept. Every time you increase your score by 20 points, the odds of being a good customer double. So, with an example, let's understand. So, if a customer with a score of 600, say, has 50 to 1 of odds of being good, that is 50 good customers for every one bad. That's the meaning of 50 to 1 odds. Then a customer of score 620, initially score was 600, now let's say the score becomes 620, it has now 100 to 1 of odds. So what do you understand if a score of 640? So it will then double the odds, 200 is to 1. And this makes intuitive sense, right? Because your score is increasing and you will get less risky, and that is why your odds of being goods double. And here's the mathematical formula. In the scaling method, the score is equal to offset plus factor into WOE. That is the factor, we all know that the factor is logarithm of 2 divided by PDO. Offset is reference score minus factor into log of odds at the reference point. And WOE, we all know that it is the weight of evidence. So let me give you an example. Suppose your bank, let's say, gives you a reference score of 600 points and odds at that particular reference score is 50 is to 1. That is, out of 50 goods, there is a chance of 1 bad. And PDO is given to you as 20 points. So, if you put up in this formula, the factor formula, you will get it like, suppose you are getting at 28.86. And if you calculate the offset, you will get like 487.1. Now your task is that for each variable and each bin, you need to calculate the points which is given by this formula. So let's say you have 8 variables in your model and the offsets get a split of, now this offset that in the below if you see 487.5, then it will divide or it will split up into 8 variables. And that's why you will get approx 61 points per variable. Now, let's say for a variable like age, and that particular age is lying in the bin 35 to 45, just for an example. It lies between that. Let's say 38. So, and for that you calculated, hypothetically you assume that you do have WOE as 0.18. You do have WOE from the regression equation, you do have its coefficient 0.025, because I'm assuming that you have fitted the logistic regression model, right? And by putting in this formula, you get its point as, if you calculate that, you get it points as 61, let's say around 61 points you are getting for this particular age, who is lying in a bin of 35 to 45. So an applicant who is falling in that particular age category is getting 61.13 from the age variable. And here's the magic. When you add up all the individual variable points, you will get the total score. So the total score is summation of all the points for each attribute. Here attribute meaning the variable, for each variable you do divide that variable into different bins. For each bin you are calculating separate points, and then you are aggregating it to get a final value for that particular age. Like here, for age there are different bins, you have different WOE, you have different coefficients. Coefficients will be the same because it is coming from the logistic regression model, but points will be different with respect to the different WOE concept. And that's how you will you will repeat this step for different kind of variables. And then you will finally calculate the total score. When a person, let's say, has a age of 30 to 35, then you will assigning it 5.5 points. He might be having a different credit score, you are assigning different points, and that's how for each variable you calculate all the points, and then you sum all the points and then apply a decision rule to decide whether after coming, let's say 648 points are coming up, then you decide whether you are approving that customer or not. So why this method is very much brilliant? Because the relationship between the variables and the risk, it is consistent and no non-weird linearities. And also it is explainable. You can tell a customer that your score went up, let's say 40 points, let's say, and why? Because of any of the particular variable criteria or any of the particular points criteria. You can exactly tell us, not the points criteria, but from the variable perspective, you can say that this is performing good and this is performing bad, and that exactly is affecting your score. So now that we understand how to scale, let's talk about the critical business decision. Like, where do you set the cutoff? Because we do over here saw that we need to apply the decision rule. So let's talk about that where do you set that cutoff and who determines like when to get it approved, right? This PDO method is something that we already have discussed. You can go through that. Now we'll discuss about the cutoff score. So question 1 and 2 that we have discussed, it's about understanding the mechanics, and this question is about understanding the business strategy, the optimal cutoff score. So the statistically optimal cutoff is the one that maximizes the discrimination, the one that gives you the highest AUC, and is almost never the cutoff of a bank that actually they use. Because banks don't care about the perfect discrimination, but they actually care about, we everybody know that it's all about the profits. And profits, making the profit is way more complex than the statistics. So here, this question tests whether you understand that credit risk is fundamentally a business problem and not an academic one. And if you answer this purely from a statistical angle, you have already lost the interviewer. Because the interviewer wants someone who can balance that statistical rigorness with business pragmatism. And that's what makes the greatest risk managers. So the question here is that how do you determine that this optimal cutoff? And what business factors influence this decision? So let's be real. Determining cutoff scores is where statistics meet strategy and is very messy. The statistical approach, we all know that we need to find the cutoff that maximizes the KS statistic, that is the Kolmogorov-Smirnov statistic. But that's the score when you get the maximum separation between goods and bad customers. And we all know that at particular that point, the discrimination is highest because business constraints dominate. And let me walk you through the real factors that matter. So first is the approval rate target. So your bank strategy might be that you want to approve, let's say, 70% of your applications. Why? Because that's the competitive. And if your competitors are already approving 75% and you can only approve 60%, so you already have lose the market share and you work backwards. So basically, you need to find the cutoff score that results in exactly 70% of the applicants being approved. And that cutoff becomes your decision point, regardless of what that statistical optimum is. And for this, you need to connect with the business. Also, the bad rate tolerance. Different products can absorb different bad rates. A credit card product might tolerate, let's say, for 4 to let's say approx 5%, I guess, an annual loss, because customers' limits might can be reduced and collections can become fast. A mortgage product might only have can tolerate 0.5 to say 1% because defaults there are catastrophic and you end up owning your house that you don't want. And so you ask, why bad rates? What kind of bad rates and how much that can we afford? And then you find the cutoff that keeps you at particular that bad rate. Also, you need to understand the profitability analysis as well. Profitability optimization. So for this, you need to be very sophisticated. And for this, you also need to calculate for at each of cutoff score. You need to calculate the annual profit rates. Let's say you are looking at a credit card product and at a cutoff score of let's say 600, you approve let's say approx 85% or 90% of the population, and your bad rate is approx 5.5 to 6%. You do have your average credit limit. You have your annual interest income as well, which you can calculate from the number of customers and the average credit limit being provided to them. You would then calculate the expected loss on that particular APR, annual interest. You do get from the business the operating cost as well, and then you calculate the annual net annual profit. And same step you repeat with different cutoff scores, 610, 620, and the cutoff at which you are getting maximum profit, and keeping a balance of approval rate and discussing it with the business and showing them the optimal cutoff scores as well. You can convince them to get a cutoff score at their particular requirement, even though you are approving fewer customers, but you are making more profit. In let's say at 620, you do get 6.2 millions of profit, but here you observe that comparatively you do have approval rate of 78%, but bad rate is also comparatively low. So you set a cutoff of 620 not because it has the best discrimination, but it maximizes the profit. So this whole picture is being finalized post discussion with the business stakeholders. Also, the market positioning. Let's say if all your competitors are approving customers at a score of 620 and you only approve at 650, then what happens? Obviously, you will lose the market share and customers go elsewhere. You might need to lower your cutoff just to stay competitive. Again, not because it's statistically optimal, but it is strategically necessary from the business perspective. Also, portfolio mix and capital requirements as well. So if all your competitors are approving the score that we discussed at the 620, but something, let's say junior analyst missed entirely, the regulatory capital. Under Basel III capital rules, your riskier loans require more capital than safer loans, and which we are not considering earlier, let's say at the score of 620 or 650. So if you lower your cutoff and start approving the riskier customers, your risk-weighted assets increase and you might hit capital constraints. So your CFO will tell you that we can afford only 500 million in a new credit card risk. And that constraint might force you to raise your cutoff. Even your model says the lower is better. So there are many multiple points that you need to think of at the time of the cutoff selection. Segment specific optimization as well. Segmentation also plays a very important role, because where it gets really smart is that when different customer segments have different optimal cutoffs. Let's say maybe for customers with loan amount greater than let's say $10,000, you can approve down to let's say 620 because interest income is also high. But for new customers, the cost of acquisition is also high and the relationship value is also uncertain. So you might require a score of 650. That is that you are increasing a threshold. here, because the customers are new here, so you cannot take chance, you cannot lower down for them, you need to assess them rigorously. So your approval policy here becomes a matrix and not a single number. So once considering all the factors and everything, here the banks actually do, they build a like we discussed, they build a cutoff table, and for each possible cutoff they calculate the approval rate, bad rate, expected loss, profit, capital required, and market positioning. Then they go to the from the stakeholder perspective, then they go to the stakeholders like your CEO, your CFO, your business heads, your risk officers, all comes in. We then discuss the constraints, which comes in our decision making process, and then they will tell you like what's our minimum approval rate, what's our maximum bad rate tolerance, what will be our capital budget and everything. And then after considering all the decisions, then find the cutoff that satisfies the constraints while maximizing the profit. So this is a very thorough understanding. I request you to pause the video and then think about what exactly that we do have discussed, right? So when an interviewer asks you this question, that regarding the optimal cutoff and everything, they are testing whether you understand that credit risk management is all about optimizing under constraints, business constraints, and not the statistical ones. And most junior candidates answer that we maximize the AUC or we find the highest case statistic. But senior candidates, they answer that we'll run a profitability analysis. We will also consider the business constraints and we'll then find the cutoff that achieves our strategic objectives while staying within the risk tolerance. And that's the answer that will get you hired. Now, since we do have talk about the cutoffs that we need to use and how to select them, let's talk about the variables that go into the scorecard, because variables are very important. And then this variable selection is brings us to the very important topic of WOE and IV, weight of evidence and information value, two of the most important concepts in credit scoring. So WO and IV, as you all know, these are the industry standards for variable selection and credit scoring. They are not just statistical measures, they are fundamental to how credit worthiness is evaluated. But here where most people get lost. WO and IV aren't just the random metrics. They have a specific mathematical relationship to logistic regression that makes them perfect for credit scoring, but not suitable for other models like random forest. So the interviewer is testing that if you can articulate not just what WOE and IV are, but why they are specifically used in credit scoring. And do you understand that connection to logistic regression? Can you explain the practical process of calculating them? And if you can't, this means that you are just memorizing the metrics. And if you can, this shows that you are going into the depth and you do have depth knowledge. So the question is that explain WOE and IV and their role in variable selection for scorecard development. So first let's start with WOE because everything else builds on it. Keeping from a definition perspective, WOE measures the predictive power of an individual variable, or more specifically, a particular bin or category of a variable at separating the good customers from the bad customers. So think of it this way. You are looking at age groups. In the 25, let's say to 35 age group, are there more good borrowers or bad borrowers relative to the overall population? That's the understanding of this formula. So the formula is logarithm of percentage of bads upon percentage of goods, or you can take it a reciprocal also, logarithm of percentage of goods upon percentage of bads, where percentage of goods equal to percentage of all customers, good customers that fall into this particular age group, and percentage of bads is talking about the percentage of all bad customers that fall into that particular age group. Let's say for a particular age group you do calculate a WOE. There can be a possibility that you might be getting positive WOE, you might be getting negative WOE, or you might be getting zero WOE as well. Positive is okay, but what does this negative WOE mean? So if I keep the formula as logarithm of percentage of goods by percentage of bads, or the vice versa that is being shown, it means that higher concentration of bad customers are there if negative WOE value comes, or it suggests the unfavorable characteristics also. So WOE tells you the directional risk of each category. Negative WOE means risky and positive WOE means safe. Next, we also need to discuss the IV, information value, which is the overall predictive power of an entire variable, and it aggregates the WA across all the bins. The formula is percentage of goods minus percentage of bads summation into WA, and you calculate this for every bin of the variable and then you sum it up. And once you have all this, you can finally have IV for each of the variable. Once you calculate for each variable, the WO you do have separate WO, you calculate the separate IVs and then you aggregate it to get IV for a particular variable. So what does this IV value mean? According to the industry standards, IV less than 0.02 is not useful for prediction. We generally exclude this variable. IV of 0.02 to 0.1 generally shows weak predictive power. And IV greater than 0.5 is bit of suspicious. And there we need to investigate for data errors or overfitting. So once we get IV for different variables, we can classify or we can categorize them based on the thresholds. And then we can decide what actions need to be taken. So here's the critical part that separates who know credit scoring from people who just know the statistics. WA and IV, they are specifically designed for logistic regression models and credit scoring. So when you transform your variables into WA values and run the logistic regression, something magical happens. The relationship between the variable and default become linear in the log odd space. And this linearity is crucial for credit scoring because it means the relationship is stable, predictable, and can be easily converted into the scorecard points. So if you have used a different model like random forest, WOE would be less important because random forest doesn't require this linear relationship. So from the process perspective, you take a continuous variable like income, then you bin it into 10 to 20 groups, which is fine classing. We do have discussed WOE previously. You can check out my channel for detailed understanding. Then you calculate WOE for each bin. You combine the bins with similar WOE, which is coarse classing. You calculate the total IV for each variable, and then you compare IV across all variables. And then you select all the variables having IV greater than 0.1 for the modeling. And you use WOE transformed variables in the logistic regression. So I hope that you do have understood the steps that we have discussed. So have you ever thought about why this works so well? Because WOE handles several data challenges simultaneously. Outliers get automatically grouped into the bins. Missing values get their own bin. Categorical जो variables हैं, they get their natural groupings. Non-linear relationships, they become linear in log odd space. So when an interviewer asks you about the WOE in IV, they want to hear that you understand that this isn't random. It's a specific framework which is designed for credit scoring. And you understand the connection to the logistic regression as well. Most candidates just recite the formulas, and only the good candidate explain why exactly this is happening. So I hope that you do have understood that how to calculate WA, and using this you have selected your variables using IV. But now what? You should understand that since you have got your fine classing with lots of bins, but how are you keeping them? We do have discussed it previously. And that brings to our next question, the concept of coarse classing. Because understanding that coarse classing is not just nice to have, it's essential for stability, simplicity, and regulatory compliance. So a junior analyst might think that more bins means more accuracy, and this means the better model. But this is wrong. A senior professional knows that fewer and stable bins means better generalization and model doesn't crash during the production. And I'll tell you that if you nail this question, you demonstrate that you have thought about real world scorecard deployment and not just the optimization. So the question is that what's coarse classing and why is it necessary after the initial fine classing? So imagine that you have got 20 bins for income. Some bins only have 100 customers. Those bins are fragile. And if your data is slightly changed, or if your score a different population, those bins might have different WOE values. So when you combine them with adjacent similar WOE bins, you increase the sample size. Now each combined bin has maybe 400 customers and suddenly it becomes stable. So small data fluctuations don't swing your WOE widely. Stability is everything in production models. A model that works great on the development data but crashes on new data is worthless. Right? So you need to understand the concept of fine classing and coarse classing. So imagine building a decision engine for your loan officers from parsimony and operational stability point of view. You want to be able to look at them from a simple scorecard, simple, clean, and 4 categories. But now imagine you had 20 income categories, right? Loan officers get confused. Data entry errors also increase, and implementation bugs can also happen. There is very most important point of regulatory compliance. Modern banking regulators care about the model, which is the model explainability. A model with 4 bins per variable is explainable, but a model with 20 bins per variable looks like that you are overfitting the model. So when regulators examine your model, you need to defend it. Like, we have 4 income bins because they show clear risk differentiation. We have 20 income bins because we want maximum granularity. That becomes suspicious. So you should have proper justification. Also, one most important point is the multicollinearity. More bins means more predictor variables in the logistic regression, which will increase the risk of multicollinearity. So, multilinearity can cause the unstable coefficient estimates. Model can fail also if you are validating on a holdout sample. But coarse classing can solve these problems if you can do it into fewer bins. And that's how the model will have better generalization to the new data. There are some formal rules also for coarse classing. Each bin should have at least 5% of the population. So if you have 10,000 of the customers, each bin should have 500 plus of customers. Each bin must have goods and bads. So if a bin has 500 customers but 0 defaults, it breaks your model. WOE should be distinct between bins. If 2 adjacent bins have nearly identical WOE, you should combine them. One should also prefer the monotonicity trends as well. If WOE jumps around randomly, you should investigate whether your binning strategy is right or not. Business logic should also align with binning. If you combine 2 income groups that seem conceptually different, stakeholders will question it. So, coarse classing isn't just about perfection. It's about the balancing of granularity to capture real risk differences, but not so much that you overfit and lose the stability. So when an interviewer hears you that you talk about coarse classing, they know you are thinking about the production realities and not just the theoretical optimization. So I hope that you have got your bins understanding and you have done your coarse classing. But what happens when you calculate WOE and one of your bins had no customers? So let's talk about how to handle that. This is a very technical depth question and it's not asked in every interview, but in more the senior roles and especially when you are talking to quants or senior modelers. So this question might come up. Like, do you understand the practical implementation challenges of WOE calculation? Do you know the industry best practices for edge cases? And can you think about a problem and appropriately find the solution for that. So let's see if you have built a scorecard code before question. If you brush past this quickly, the interviewer knows that you haven't actually implemented the WE calculation, you have just gone through a code that you might have seen somewhere. But if you go deep and mention some adjustment concept, Laplace smoothing or validation checks, then I think they know that you have gone through it through the detail. So since you do know that you are calculating WE, let's say for credit utilization, you should be getting a bin for no credit utilization, because this case can happen. So no credit utilization means that customer with credit lines but zero balance. So you have your total customers with zero utilization count, you have good customers count, you have bad customers count, and then you get a bin for 100% credit utilization, where your total customers, let's say 50, your good customers is 0 and your bad customers is 50. Now you try to calculate WE for this particular event, and if you put up in this formula, you will see that you are getting, since the WE formula has logarithm concept as well, since your good customers is coming out to be 0, so you will not be able to calculate WE, because that will give you the mathematically undefined problem, and here the maths breaks and your model will crash. So here's the industry standard solution. You should use the 0.5 addition rule. This is called the Laplace smoothing. And before calculating WOE, add 0.5 to the count of events and non-events in each bin. This is very small enough to understand that this will not distort the calculation, but it is largely enough to prevent the mathematical breakdown, this 0.5 adjustment, right? So this becomes your WE adjusted formula, where you are adjusting 0.5 to numerator and denominator. And now that we have a valid large positive WE, it makes sense that this extreme bin should get a high score because of its low default rates. You can go through this slide. I do have put up the example to understand why this works and how exactly it is working with, let's say, of age bin with 0 events, right? So there are some alternative approaches as well. Some practitioners use the addition of -1 instead, -1, or say not -1, I would say the 1 instead of adding the 0.5, that because of going towards a bit more conservative approach. Others can use 0.1 as well instead of 0.5 for very large data sets, because 0.5 seems too arbitrary. So that depends on the judgment and the kind of data set that you have. Always the prevention is better than cure. The better approach is to prevent this problem during the binning. Like we discussed, you can use equal frequency binning approach. We do have discussed, where you are dividing the data so that each bin has approximately equal number of observations, and this naturally ensures that each bin has both the events and non-events. You can set up minimum bin size rules upfront, that each bin must have at least, let's say, 50%, or not 50%, I would say 50 count of observations, which will prevent the zero event binning. Also, you can create the bins using the development data large enough that each bin naturally has the events and non-events. So all these are the measures that one should think about during the development phase. Validation check is also important. Like after calculating WOE with or without adjustments, validate that your binning is working correctly. You should run logistic regression with just one WOE transform variable, like the log odds formula. Log odds is the intercept plus coefficient into WOE. We all know that. And the coefficient should be approximately equal to 1. And why this matters? Because when you are coding the scorecard systems, especially in Python or R, these edge cases will come up and your database will have unusual customer segments. Your binning won't be perfect and you haven't thought through this and how to handling these cases. Your model development will fail and you will debug for days only to realize that you need to add something for the smoothing. Senior modelers expect you to know this, and showing that you have thought through this implementation details, it demonstrates that you have actually built the model and not just seen some coding examples. So I hope that you do have understand this concept, like how to handle these WOE edge cases, and you have got your bin variables with the WOE values. Also, you should have an understanding of running the logistic regression model. If you don't have that particular clear understanding, do let me know in the comments. We'll discuss that thoroughly. But then what? Supposedly you do have that understanding, then what? How do you get that the regression coefficients to the actual scorecard points? Have you ever thought about that? Regression to scorecard points. This is very technical core of scorecard development. This is where the statistics becomes business tool, because here the interviewer is testing if you can explain the bridge between the statistical modeling and the operational aspects. An interviewer asks this to separate who have built the complete scorecard system from people who know just bits and pieces. So you should know how to explain the logistic regression coefficients, like how they are transformed into the scorecard points. This is very beautiful stuff. So when you transform these variables into WOE and run the logistic regression model, the model becomes this: log odds is equal to beta naught plus beta 1 into WOE1 plus beta 2 into WOE2 up to and so on, like how many variables you have. And each beta is telling you the weight of that particular variable. A larger coefficient means that the variable is more important for predicting the default. And here's the key insight. When you use the WOE transformed variables, the regression coefficients that are coming out from this, they have very special meaning, because they are directly related to how much each bin should contribute to the score. So the transformation to the points is WOE into coefficient into factor plus offset, where WO is, we all know, weight of evidence, coefficient, factor, offset. Offset is important. Factor, we all know, it's points to double the odds. Offset is the base points, which is distributed equally across all the variables. And suppose that you do have built a credit card scorecard with 8 variables, and you decide to build a logistic regression model and got the results. You decide that, let's say, the reference score should be 600. Odds at reference points is 50:1. Supposedly you are taking PDO as 20 and factor after calculating is coming out to be 28.86. And now for each variable, let's say credit score, you bin that particular variable into 5 groups with the WOE values calculated. And then you are calculating the points for each of the bins. For each of the bins for the credit score. We do have discussed these bin points in previous questions as well. And similarly, you are repeating the same process for other variables, that you are first calculating the WOE for each variable. Then for each variable, you do have already the coefficients calculated. And then you are calculating the points from using this formula. And you repeat this process for all the variables. Then you are building the final scorecard structure, where your scorecard might be looking like something like this, where you have your age variable, let's say, different bin buckets, different WOE values, your coefficient, and your different points that you came across using this formula. And that's how the total score comes up for a particular candidate, for a medium risk candidate or low risk or high risk, depending on what attributes they have, that particular customer. And you calculate the total score, and then you decide basis the cutoff score whether you are approving the customer or declining the customer. Now, since log of odds is factor into total of score minus the reference score, you can also calculate the odds as well by taking the by removing the log from here. And once you remove the log, it will come up to e to the power of factor into this particular formula. So let's say if an applicant score is, let's say, 620 with a factor of 28.86 and a base score of 600. Do let me know what the odds will be. Calculate it and let me know in the comments. because for the odds you have to take e to the power of this particular formula, and you have everything that comes up that is required in this particular formula. So the beauty of the system is that the score directly relates to the odds of the default. The relationship is linear and you can explain it to anyone once you have understood the concept very much in a conceptual way, and it's mathematically grounded in logistic regression. So when an interviewer hears you explaining all these concepts, connecting all the dots, connecting all the regression coefficients to how the scorecard points is coming up to this particular odds relationship as well, they know that you don't just know the mechanics, you understand the underlying logic as well, and that is higher worthy knowledge, and you will get the job. So we do have built your scorecard and assigned points to every attribute, but there are still many questions left to cover, and we'll discuss in the next one. Otherwise, this video will become too long. Meanwhile, I encourage you to rewatch this video and focus on understanding the technical defaults. It will really help you crack the interviews. And if you found this video helpful, don't forget to like it and subscribe to my channel to stay updated on the next parts of this topic. Also, comment below and let me know which question you found more interesting. Stay tuned and see you in the next part.